What if the Byzantine Empire had risen from the ashes once more, not in the Middle Ages, but at the dawn of the 20th century? What if the tides of World War I had carried Greece back to its imperial glory, restoring the double-headed eagle over Constantinople itself? History came close, painfully close, to writing that story. Greece entered the Great War late, almost as the smoke of battle was already thinning. Yet behind that delay lay hesitation, opportunity, and tragedy intertwined. In 1917, after years of political struggle, Greece finally joined the Allies. But by then, many golden offers had already slipped through their fingers. Britain had dangled the promise of Cyprus and vast stretches of western Anatolia, a prize meant to reward early participation. By the time Greek troops marched into the conflict, those excellent deals had faded into diplomatic memory. Still, the Hellenes fought with remarkable zeal, driven by the dream of reclaiming their ancestral lands, and perhaps of restoring the old Byzantine Empire.
This is your brain when you're...
What if the Byzantine Empire had risen from the ashes once more, not in the Middle Ages, but at the dawn of the 20th century? What if the tides of World War I had carried Greece back to its imperial glory, restoring the double-headed eagle over Constantinople itself? History came close, painfully close, to writing that story. Greece entered the Great War late, almost as the smoke of battle was already thinning. Yet behind that delay lay hesitation, opportunity, and tragedy intertwined. In 1917, after years of political struggle, Greece finally joined the Allies. But by then, many golden offers had already slipped through their fingers. Britain had dangled the promise of Cyprus and vast stretches of western Anatolia, a prize meant to reward early participation. By the time Greek troops marched into the conflict, those excellent deals had faded into diplomatic memory. Still, the Hellenes fought with remarkable zeal, driven by the dream of reclaiming their ancestral lands, and perhaps of restoring the old Byzantine Empire under what became known as the Megali idea. After victory in the Great War, that dream seemed tantalizingly close. The Treaty of Sevres in 1920 handed Greece territories that reached deep into Asia Minor. But fate had one final twist. Between 1919 and 1922, in the bitter Greco-Turkish War, Greece lost everything it had gained. The ancient vision of a reborn Roman Empire dissolved once more, this time under the relentless tide of modern nationalism. But imagine if things had unfolded differently. It all began in July 1914. The Great War erupted, shaking every throne in Europe. King Constantine I of Greece, a monarch with strong ties to Germany, wanted to keep his country neutral, much like Romania's King Ferdinand. Yet even as he preached caution, Constantine quietly prepared the army for the conflict he knew would come. In August, while inspecting the troops with his son, Prince George, tragedy struck. A Turkish assassination attempt blew apart their car. The king and his heir were killed instantly. And so, fate placed the crown upon the head of 21-year-old Alexander, young, charismatic, and uncertain of the path ahead. King Alexander quickly became beloved both at home and abroad. He was caught between two worlds, the Entente and the Central Powers, Britain and Germany, East and West. Yet, unlike his father, Alexander leaned toward the dynamic Prime Minister Eleftherios Venizelos, a man who believed destiny favored those bold enough to seize it. In early 1915, Britain made a tempting offer. If Greece joined the war and moved to defend Serbia, she would receive enormous lands in Anatolia. The catch? Macedonia would have to be ceded to Bulgaria. Alexander refused. A few months later, as the Gallipoli campaign began, London came again, this time with Cyprus on the table. Still, there was no clear promise about Constantinople, the eternal prize. By late 1915, however, the Greek army was far stronger. When Bulgaria entered the war against Serbia, Alexander took his chance. In November, Greece declared war on Bulgaria and the Central Powers. The Bulgars, expecting an easy victory, marched south into Macedonia and east toward Serbia. But the Greeks held firm. Within weeks, they drove the invaders back, recapturing western Bulgaria and even threatening Sofia itself before the front lines froze into stalemate. Meanwhile, on the beaches of Gallipoli, the British were bleeding for every inch of sand. In December 1915, Greek reinforcements finally arrived, and they changed everything. While the British were pinned down on the coast, the Hellenic fleet struck from the Aegean, opening a fresh front that overwhelmed the Ottomans. By March 1916, the enemy was encircled and destroyed. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk himself, exhausted and ill, died only weeks after the campaign's end. With the Ottoman front shattered and Bulgaria collapsing from internal unrest, Greece surged forward. The army reclaimed eastern Thrace, reuniting long-lost Greek lands. They abandoned their claim to Macedonia in exchange for undisputed control of the western Aegean. It was a calculated move, and it worked. Bulgaria's monarchy tottered, its government barely holding together. Now, for the first time since 1453, the path to Constantinople lay open. Flush with victory, the Greek army pushed east and retook Adrianople. Without even informing the British, they advanced toward the Queen of Cities itself, Constantinople. Just as they had done at Thessaloniki in the Second Balkan War, they moved swiftly, decisively, and alone. When the siege began, Britain hesitated. Rather than commit forces to take the ancient city, Churchill and the British High Command diverted their strength to Serbia. By May 1916, British expeditionary troops had joined Greek units on the Balkan front, forcing Austria-Hungary to divert entire divisions south. The fighting turned into a grim stalemate of trenches, mud, and attrition, the same deadly rhythm as in France. Romania soon joined the Allies, opening yet another front against Austria-Hungary, though its armies proved weak and disorganized. The main Greek forces, meanwhile, stayed focused on cutting off Constantinople, tightening the noose, starving the Ottoman capital, preparing for the campaign that might have changed history forever. By September 1916, the impossible began to feel inevitable. The Greek campaign in Anatolia, once a daring gamble, had transformed into a full-scale invasion. On September 2nd, Greek troops landed at Smyrna under the blazing Ionian sun, their blue and white banners rippling over the harbor as church bells rang in every quarter. The landing stretched the Ottoman defenses thin, too thin. From Smyrna, the Hellenic forces expanded outward, striking again at Ivalik and Phoca. The so-called Smyrna campaign soon evolved into the Ionian front, a vast theater that would determine the fate of both empires, one ancient, one dying. The mountains of western Anatolia turned into the new heart of the war. Greek columns advanced cautiously through the rugged valleys, securing high ground and stabilizing the southern flank along the Meander River. The ancient river, once home to philosophers and poets, now echoed with artillery. Once the southern lines were secure, the Hellenes pivoted north, tightening the noose around Constantinople itself. By this time, the world was changing faster than any general could plan. The United States entered the war in April 1917, sealing the doom of the Central Powers. The Ottomans fought on, desperate but fractured. To the north, the Russian Empire was crumbling, yet the Romanovs, spared the chaos of Bolshevik revolution in this altered timeline, managed to flee south. Denied refuge by Britain, the imperial family found unexpected sanctuary among their Orthodox brothers in Greece, arriving to a quiet welcome on the island of Corfu. As the Greek campaign pressed forward, the Dardanelles fell completely under Hellenic control. In October, the Ionian army captured Bursa, once the first capital of the Ottoman dynasty. The city's fall sent shockwaves through Anatolia. Within Bursa's walls, Greek and Armenian citizens rose up in revolt, sabotaging Ottoman arsenals and guiding Greek troops through backstreets. When the smoke cleared, the defenders were gone, their banners torn down. The population greeted the Greeks not as conquerors, but as liberators. From there, the advance only accelerated. The army surged north, besieging Nicomedia, the last major stronghold before Constantinople. At the same time, a southern column marched toward Magnesia, then Philadelphia, both symbolic prizes. Philadelphia, the last Byzantine city on mainland Anatolia, lost in 1390, fell on January 18th after a brief but fierce struggle. The Greek soldiers who entered its gates wept openly, knowing they were walking on the same stones their ancestors had defended 5 centuries earlier. By February 1918, Magnesia had fallen as well. To the east, history bent further still. Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan all declared independence from the collapsing Russian Empire. The ancient Christian nations of the Caucasus had risen again, and for the first time in centuries, the Orthodox world felt united. By March, Nicomedia fell. The supply lines to Constantinople were cut. The Ottoman capital, besieged for over a year, was starving. Inside the walls, the once mighty defenders faced disease, hunger, and despair. The mosques were silent, the bazaars empty. Priests in the Greek trenches whispered that angels watched over them, that the spirits of Constantine, Justinian, Heraclius, and Basil II walked among their ranks, guiding their hands, steadying their hearts. Then, in late May, the miracle, or perhaps the destiny, arrived. The Golden Gate of Constantinople, sealed since 1453, was shattered by artillery fire. The city trembled as shells rained down from the heights. Turkish morale collapsed. Civilians fled toward the sea, only to find the Bosphorus blockaded by the Hellenic fleet. And in that chaos, something strange spread through the ranks. A story, whispered and impossible, that the marble body of Constantine XI, the last Roman emperor, had been found beneath the city, preserved by time itself. When a great ox's horn echoed through the night, whether by chance or omen, the soldiers took it as the sign foretold in prophecy. The emperor had risen. On May 29, 1918, exactly 465 years to the day since the Ottoman conquest, the Greek army entered the Queen of Cities. The tricolor flag of Greece fluttered atop Hagia Sophia as church bells erupted across the skyline for the first time in centuries. The people rejoiced. Greeks, Armenians, and even some Turks who had suffered under their own empire's weight. The Ottoman pashas and caliphs who remained were slain or captured. The streets ran red, but through the blood and the ruin, the light of Byzantium returned. The Patriarch of Constantinople proclaimed the liberation a divine act. Some soldiers swore they saw the figure of Constantine XI himself, kneeling in the smoke, blessing the troops before ascending toward the dawn. The dream of the Megali idea had come true. In the east, the Armenians seized their moment. Backed by Greek and Allied support, they surged into eastern Anatolia, reclaiming their ancestral highlands. Cities like Van and Erzurum rose under their banners, driven by both vengeance and rebirth. The Ottomans, shattered, sued for peace. Across Europe, the dominoes of empire fell. The Treaty of St. Mihiel in 1919 dissolved Austria-Hungary completely. Serbia marched north in vengeance, plunging deep into Hungary until the exhausted Hungarians signed the Treaty of Trianon on June 4, 1920, creating the new kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes, soon known as Yugoslavia. Greece and Yugoslavia partitioned Albania between them, ending the decades of Balkan chaos. In Anatolia, the once eternal Ottoman Empire ceased to exist. On August 10, 1920, the Treaty of Severus was signed, but under entirely different terms than in our history. For its decisive role in the destruction of the Ottoman regime, Greece gained Eastern Thrace, Bithynia, Ionia, Aeolis, and Cyprus, fulfilling nearly every promise ever made by Britain and France. The British attempted to impose an international administration over Constantinople, hoping to preserve influence, but the United States and France refused to back them. King Alexander stood firm. Constantinople would remain Greek. In compromise, Britain was granted a single naval base on the Sea of Marmara and limited trade rights through the straits. In exchange, Greece received something priceless. Britain returned the stolen treasures of the Parthenon and the Acropolis, the marbles taken by Lord Elgin over a century earlier. When the crates arrived in Athens, King Alexander stood before the restored sculptures and said softly, "Even stone remembers where it belongs." His words were carried across Europe. For the first time in modern memory, Greece was not a pawn of empires, but the reborn empire itself. By the early 1920s, Greece, now the resurrected Byzantine Empire in all but name, stood astride two worlds, ancient faith and modern power. The flames of the Great War had consumed empires, but from the ashes of the Ottomans, the Hellenic phoenix rose once again. Italy, humiliated and overextended, renounced its fragile claims in Anatolia. In exchange for recognition of its colonial interests elsewhere, it withdrew from the Lycian coast, returning Rhodes and the Dodecanese Islands to Greece. The deal, crafted under British supervision, secured Italian dignity, at least on paper. But in truth, Italy had lost its foothold in the east. The Mediterranean, long divided between Western powers and dying sultans, now glittered with Byzantine sails. Yet, peace did not come easily. Since May 1919, the Greco-Turkish War had raged like an aftershock of empire. The remnants of the Young Turks, desperate, humiliated, and furious, seized control in Ankara under the leadership of General Tal Osman, a harsh and untested figure. Without Ataturk to unify them, they turned inward, seeking revenge rather than strategy. Their first act was reckless, an assault on Lycia, driving out the Italian garrisons and reigniting full-scale war. Within months, Italy abandoned Anatolia altogether, retreating in disgrace. The Greeks pressed forward. The Battle of Tarsia followed, a thunderous victory that crushed the birthplace of the Ottoman dynasty itself. Across the Aegean, church bells rang for 3 days. The empire that had once conquered Constantinople now lay broken at its roots. Further east, an unlikely alliance rose. Armenian and Assyrian forces, supported by Greek volunteers and allied equipment, struck back at the Turkish militias near Manzikert, the same plains where the Byzantine army had fallen in 1071. This time, history reversed itself. The Turks were annihilated, and the fields of Manzikert were reclaimed in a moment of almost divine irony. Across the Orthodox world, celebrations erupted. For the Armenians and Assyrians, who had suffered genocide under Ottoman rule, It was both justice and rebirth.
The Turkish resistance collapsed in waves. Without Ataturk's vision, the Young Turk regime fractured under defeat. In a last act of vengeance, they unleashed terror upon the Pontic Greeks, massacring thousands before their final lines were overrun. But the cost of their cruelty was annihilation.
The Hellenic army advanced relentlessly through Ankara, through Cappadocia, until the last Turkish strongholds surrendered. The Treaty of Lyon followed, a reshaping of the Near East unlike any since Rome itself. France consolidated its influence in Syria and Cilicia. Britain entrenched itself in Mesopotamia. But the Byzantines, for that is what the Greeks now called themselves, claimed the crown jewel, full sovereignty over Constantinople, eastern Thrace, Bithynia, and the western coasts of Asia Minor. Armenia, enlarged and secure, stretched deep into Anatolia, inheriting the lands once promised to Russia under the Sykes-Picot Agreement. Two new protectorates were born under French oversight, Assyria and Kurdistan, small, fragile, but symbols of self-determination in a world learning the word anew. And yet, in one of history's great ironies, it was the Greeks who restored the Ottoman name. Under Allied pressure, they reinstalled a rump Ottoman principality in central Anatolia, stripped of its sultans, governed by the regent Mustafa Sabri, a devout cleric and outspoken critic of the Young Turks. The new Ottoman state was little more than a memory, a shadow existing only to sign papers. Constantinople, the eternal prize, was gone forever. In the spring of 1925, Patriarch Basil III proclaimed the canonization of Constantine XI, the last emperor who fell in 1453.
To honor him, a colossal marble statue was raised in the heart of Constantinople, 300 feet tall, gleaming in the sun like a guardian reborn.
The people called it the new Colossus of Rhodes. For the Greeks, it was more than art. It was a declaration. Byzantium had returned. Hagia Sophia, defiled and neglected for centuries, underwent a massive restoration. The minarets, symbols of conquest, were dismantled stone by stone. In their place, a shining bronze cross was raised atop the dome. Mosaics, long buried under plaster, were revealed once again, Christ Pantocrator gazing down upon the faithful as he had in the days of Justinian. When the bells rang for the first Orthodox liturgy in nearly 500 years, the entire city wept. Religion became the foundation of identity. Orthodox Christians, whether Greek, Armenian, or Slavic, were now Romans, the sons and daughters of the empire restored. Muslims, regardless of language or heritage, were classified as Turks and resettled into the diminished Ottoman rump state. Byzantium had become a theocratic empire in all but name, unified by faith, purified by survival.
Democracy faded quietly.
The Church of Greece, once separated by decree in 1833, was dissolved and reunited under the ecumenical patriarch. Only Cyprus remained autocephalous, proudly bearing its title as the oldest self-governing Orthodox Church since 431 CE. By 1928, the transformation was complete. The restoration of Hagia Sophia culminated in a moment that shocked the world. King Alexander, standing before the great altar, placed upon his head the golden crown of the Eastern Roman emperors. He was proclaimed Alexander II, Basileus ton Romaion, the restorer of empire. The Kingdom of Greece was no more. In its place stood the Empire of Romania, known to the West simply as Byzantium. The monarch changed his family name from Glucksburg to Constantinos, echoing Constantine the Great, much as Britain's royal family had once changed from Saxe-Coburg-Gotha to Windsor. His newborn son, baptized Basil III within Hagia Sophia, symbolized both continuity and ambition, an heir to empire in an age of republics.
At home, Alexander was worshipped.
Abroad, he was feared.
Bulgaria fumed at the resurrection of its ancient rival.
The Italians, led by Mussolini, were incensed, their dream of a revived Rome overshadowed by a resurrected Byzantium. Mussolini severed diplomatic ties, calling Alexander the false Caesar.
But France rejoiced.
Byzantium and Armenia joined the Little Entente, forming a powerful Orthodox bloc alongside Romania and Yugoslavia. In the east, faith had once again become geopolitics. White Russian émigrés, the remnants of the defeated Tsarist armies, flooded into Byzantine ports, welcomed as brothers. They were given land in depopulated Thrace and western Anatolia, helping rebuild farms and factories. Their officers revitalized the Byzantine army, transforming it into one of the most disciplined and modern forces in the Mediterranean. By the early 1930s, the empire's economy had surpassed that of Italy. Its fleets patrolled the Aegean and Black Seas. Its army, trained by Russian veterans, stood as the Orthodox sword of Europe. Parliament became ceremonial, its upper house rebranded as the Senate, a council of generals, nobles, and industrial magnates. The emperor ruled by decree, though he called it divine mandate. As Europe darkened once again in the late 1930s, Byzantium stood ready. Tensions with Bulgaria simmered, and in secret, Alexander signed a pact with Romania and Yugoslavia to partition it if war came. By 1939, the Second World War erupted across the continent. Byzantium declared neutrality, but mobilized in silence. Factories roared to life, conscription swelled the ranks, and by 1940, its standing army nearly matched that of France. Greek scientists developed advanced artillery and early radio coordination, while its fleet guarded the Aegean like an iron curtain. When Germany demanded that Romania and Yugoslavia surrender lands to Hungary and Bulgaria, the Orthodox alliance refused. Backed by Byzantium, the two kingdoms held firm. On August 30th, 1940, Hitler's ultimatum failed. Days later, Romania's King Carol II abdicated, and, with Byzantine support, the young King Michael ascended, vowing to stand against fascism. Byzantine troops entered Romania under the guise of advisors, stabilizing the front and preparing for the storm that everyone knew was coming. On September 6th, the world's axis began to turn again. Furious, the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Bulgaria, launched an invasion of Yugoslavia and prepared to strike east. And in the marble palaces of Constantinople, the Emperor of Byzantium stood before a burning horizon and whispered the question that would decide the fate of nations. Will Rome fall again, or will she finally endure?